Welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. Let's begin this evening's presentation by setting the most magnificent motivation in the universe. The motivation that Arya Nagarjuna in the commentary on the awakening mind says is the highest ideal of the great vehicle, bodhicitta. So let's think to ourselves, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And I'm attending this teaching this evening on the stages of the path to enlightenment to learn exactly how to achieve that goal of perfect love and compassion, perfect skillful means power, perfect knowing the reality and diversity of all phenomena, and this perfect caring for others that is a real excellent quality of the Buddha's mind that makes him so, so special, or her so, so special. And in dependence upon the stages of the path to enlightenment that we're learning about right here, we can achieve that goal. And that goal is achievable. And why would we want anything else except perfection? Why would we want anything less than removing all of our suffering and achieving the highest amount of happiness in the universe? So setting the motivation this evening saying, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, again, according to Arya Nagarjuna, is the highest ideal in the Mahayana. So say to yourself, I'm attending this teaching in order to achieve my highest potential for the sake of everyone in the universe. This is why I'm here, to learn exactly how to do that. And when you do that, you will have removed the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience through a very specific process that are taught in the teachings shared for beings of three capacities, the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. So let's rejoice that we have this very specific pathway that will lead us to this goal where there is a removal, a separation of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience from our mind. We remove them through a process of this distilling of our mind to its pure nature. We already have this seed of perfection, and we just have to manifest it into its full potential, because right now it's covered, and it's covered with something that isn't its nature. It's covered with things that aren't its nature, that are keeping it from being fully expansive and keep it from experiencing no suffering and experiencing the highest amount of happiness and reliability possible. So those are the stakes that we're talking about. Getting this right or not getting this right means whether I will have suffering in the future or not, and whether I'll be able to have the most highest amount of happiness in the future or not. These are the stakes that we're talking about. So in order to enter into the pathway that leads to complete Buddhahood, we have to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And we've learned very clearly in the stages of the path to enlightenment that there are many foundational practices that are required in order to generate that mind. And the good news is that Lama Tsongkhapa has explained, according to the Nalanda Pandits, who have explained, according to Buddha Shakyamuni, everything that we need to know about that process. So smile that we have this opportunity, rejoice in this process, and recognize that we can start right now heading towards exactly what we've always wanted, and we can get rid of what we've never wanted, and that's suffering. And the way that we'll get rid of it is by starting to get rid of it. And the way that we'll achieve happiness is by starting to work towards the goal of that by creating the causes that are concordant with the result that we desire. So we need to create the causes for happiness if we want happiness, and we need to abandon the causes for suffering if we want to abandon suffering. So this is a process of learning how to refine that more and more and more to its highest potential in terms of getting rid of suffering forever, and it will never occur again, and being the happiest being in the universe who's completely reliable and compassionate, and that'll never change. You will always be that being. Wouldn't that be nice if we could abandon these states of continuous suffering? So let's start by saying, hey, I'm going to put an imprint in my mind that says, I really aspire to be able to achieve this state of Buddhahood. I'm really aspiring, I wish to have this state that is just unbelievable. And when we set this within our mind, it leaves imprints. So it tells our mind this is what we like doing. We like working towards enlightenment. We know that there are, the downfalls of not doing so and the benefits of doing so. So we can really work with this mind, and we can convince ourselves through a process of knowing what these things are exactly. So we have this potential right in front of us, to practice this pathway, and it's an unerring pathway that's been presented to us. And all of those stages, as I was explaining before the phone rang, of the coarse and subtle levels of things that we need to kind of work on ourselves and purify, all of those stages are explained to us. Those stages of abandonment are explained to us in the Lamrim. So we have this unerring teaching, as I said, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni through the Nalanda Pandits, and then trickles down to us through Lama Tsongkhapa's unerring instruction. So let's begin by setting this motivation. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, and imagine that just to give us confidence and just show us role models and to be able to receive blessings. Imagine that those beings who are enlightened, who've already gone through these stages that we need to go through if we want to achieve what they've achieved, are in the space in front of us. Imagining that Buddha Shakyamuni and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lord Chenrezig, in our world is in the space in front of us. And our root lamas, whoever your root lama is, Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, imagining the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage, the lineage of blessings, and all the 4 different lineages of Tibetan Buddhism or schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, Gelugpa, imagining all of the enlightened masters in the space in front of you, the Theravadan tradition, the Dharmagupta tradition, all of these enlightened masters, the Sanskrit tradition of the Nalanda tradition, just imagining all of these beings are here in the space in front of us to serve as our guides. And highest yoga tantra, action tantra, performance tantra, all these deities, and 35 Buddhas, protector deities, any beings you consider holy beings, who you get courage from, who you see are inspired by, who you aspire to be like. Imagine those beings in the space in front of you to give you the courage to be able to then know that this pathway is possible. Now, we said, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And the way that we become a Buddha is by engaging in activities and by doing meditations to familiarize our minds with things that are more like the way that a Buddha thinks, compassionate minds and wisdom minds. And we're trying to make our minds work more and more like a perfect enlightened being. And so what we're trying to do is familiarize ourselves with the process, familiarize ourselves with the kind of ideas, and maybe, aspire to have these incredible qualities that the Buddha has. And we imagine ourselves having them and feeling good about having them. So this is the part of the practice where we imagine that we invite all sentient beings to be here with us, to be able to share this gift of the teachings, to be able to share this gift of the stages of the path to enlightenment that encompasses everything that the Buddha ever said that's needed for any sentient being in the universe to go from wherever he or she is to complete Buddhahood. So these teachings are in our universe. And imagine that you are inviting these sentient beings here to be able to share this gift that's been so freely given to you by your teachers and so forth. So imagine, as we would do in our meditations, we're learning now about bodhicitta and the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment and various other commentaries. And we're learning this process, and we're learning how, when we think of, being generous with beings, we think of loving beings, we think of taking away the suffering of beings. When we do this, we do it in an order, and we think of actual beings. And we'll read about this later on. I won't get into it now. So let's just imagine we're bringing all sentient beings here. First, imagining we're bringing beings we actually know, starting with those who are closest to us. Beginning in this case, when we're looking at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, beginning with our mothers, whoever else we feel is the closest person who's taking care of us when we're most vulnerable. And something that I would like to say, just as a part of this aspiration, is that my mother Constance Durham is very, very ill right now and in the hospital. And if everyone could keep my mom in their prayers and pray that she's energized and can be able to kind of fight through or have courage through and have peace through the process that she's going through right now with her sickness. So if everybody could just keep my mother in mind while we're inviting all sentient beings here, and just imagine that beings like my mom, I'm sure you know many, many beings who are suffering, who are ill, who have cancers, who have many, many things. You know, we know about dialysis and kidney disease from Rinpoche, and diabetes can take so many bad turns, and addictions. And just think about any of those beings that you know who are struggling, and beginning with those who are closest to you. So in my case, I'm thinking, and all sentient beings are my mother. I begin with my mother of this life, and I think of how kind she is in this life, and then remember how kind she was in previous lives. And when thinking of this, I really wish that she could have happiness and be free from suffering. And I wish that I could be a cause for that. And unfortunately, I don't have the power right now to really know how to help in the best way. And may I be able to, in the future, be able to have the power to know how to help in the best way. And this is why we're here this evening, is to learn how to really know what's best for us, know what's best for others. And we're so encumbered by the self-cherishing attitude that we have, and thinking of ourselves day and night, that sometimes getting out of ourselves and thinking about others can be quite difficult. So imagine that you're inviting all of these different beings, friends, those neutral beings and strangers who you've seen, you know who they are, but you don't know really their story. And then maybe difficult people you bring, and see how your mind reacts to these types of beings, because we know that we have to develop a mind that isn't biased, a perfect palette for us to be able to build love and compassion, and eventually have the bodhicitta grow from it. So we have to see how we're doing in our practice. So we invite all sentient beings here to be our guest. And then we imagine that beings we don't really know where they are, or what they are, and using guidelines of maybe the Lamrim, imagining we bring hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals that we don't know. There's all kinds of animals in the sea and in the land and in the sky, all these bugs and so forth. And imagining we're bringing humans we don't know, and demigods and gods and so forth. So just imagine you bring all sentient beings here to be your guest. And now imagine that they're experiencing the intense love and affection in the eyes of the beings who are in the space in front of us, these holy enlightened beings who come to this world only to help, only to show us how to love more, how to be kinder, how to be wiser. That's their only goal. And imagine that this merit field is experiencing what we've done. We've invited every single sentient being in the universe here to be our guest. And it's their goal for every single sentient being in the universe to learn how to discover the truth of suchness themselves. So imagine if beings who have only one goal in mind see all beings assembled to learn about what that goal is. And imagine the bliss that comes over the merit field in the space in front of us. And imagine that it soothes the minds of all the sentient beings that you've invited here. Just imagine this for a moment. You've had the ability to bring all sentient beings here, and when you become a Buddha, you'll be able to connect with all sentient beings. So imagine that you've brought them to a place that's so reliable, a place to learn about the Lamrim. And also, because of the blessings of the Buddhas and the enlightened beings in the space in front of us, a cool wave of cool blessing goes over you and all sentient beings. Just by experiencing the profound view lineage, the extensive deeds lineage, the lineage of blessings, all these holy beings in the space in front of us is so rare to even think about them possibly being there. And whenever we call holy enlightened beings, they arrive, but unfortunately we don't have the karma to be able to see them. So recognize that they're always there with you, trying to encourage you to do the right thing. Always know that the enlightened beings are with you, that your Lama is on your crown, your Lama is at your heart. Your Lama is there trying to manifest in so many different ways to try to help. We're so fortunate to have this tradition. Now imagine that the merit field in the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha Vulture Peak Mountain, where the second turning of the wheel of Dharma took place, where the Buddha meant what he said, where the Buddha taught the definitive teaching, the truth of suchness, the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena, making it clear that the Buddha didn't teach non-existence at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma in terms of do things exist or not exist. Yes, they exist. What the Buddha came to tell us at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma that was very unique, because saying things don't matter, things don't exist, this was just a nihilistic view. This is not something unique. The unique thing that the Buddha came to tell us is that things don't exist the way that they appear. So the negations that are being made in this particular sutra, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, when we hear no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, etc., are not negating the existence of such things. The negation that's being made is in relation to negating a mode of existence that doesn't exist. See, people like me, people who live in the concealed truth world, believe that things exist and I exist, things like me and you, and things like chairs and planets exist from their own side, somehow independent from a mere imputation of the mind. It's something that's over there that's not just an imputation of the mind, independence upon a basis of designation that serves, as a collection that serves as its basis of designation. There's a belief that I have that I exist in some way, in some concrete, independent, intrinsic, inherent way, that I exist somehow right within this object. But when I move closer to this object and I look for this intrinsically existent I that I feel must be there, when I move closer to this object, Jeff, to find out whether I exist the way that I appear, because when I chill out, I feel like there's some concrete Jeff right there. When I'm really not thinking about it, there's some sort of feeling, there's an appearance to my mind of a concrete Jeff. But when I move closer to this intrinsically concrete Jeff that I feel is so there, I move closer to it, looking at it in among the five aggregates, or look at it in and among the various elements. I'm not able to find it within any of the parts intrinsically of me. So then when I go through this process and I find out that I can't find this thing that feels so concrete from my own side, even about me, I can't seem to find it. When I look closer and closer and closer and closer, I come to establish that I can't find an intrinsic I within my parts. I can't find it. Rinpoche said, is my head the eye? Is my nose the eye? Is my hand the eye? Is my elbow the eye? Is my heart my eye? Is my blood my eye? Are my lungs the eye? Is the space in me the eye? Going through the earth, water, fire, wind, space, consciousness, trying to find this I and falling short each time, thinking I'm going to find it on the consciousness and realizing, oh, I only identify with the Jeff as a male, and male, it has to do with a body. So any of these parts that I think I should be able to, if there's this Jeff that intrinsically exists, find it within the object right here. When I move closer to this object here, I'm not able to, within the collection of parts, find an intrinsically existent Jeff that feels like it's really there. And then if that intrinsically existent Jeff isn't found within these parts, but I'm still saying I feel like there's a concrete Jeff that's intrinsically there, then it's time to remove all of the parts altogether. Because we just looked to see if they were in them, and we fell up short. Not there, not there, not there, not there. Okay, So if it's not in the parts, maybe there's something that sits outside of this collection of parts of the earth, the water, the fire, the wind, the space, the consciousness. Maybe there's something that's Jeff or I that intrinsically exists that I can find when that isn't within those parts, consciousness and stuff like that. So remove the 6 elements, ditch them, get rid of the aggregates, get rid of your mind, get rid of your body, get rid of the space between the things in your body, get rid of it. Nothing makes sense. There's nothing findable there either. And when you start to think, okay, I feel like there's an intrinsically existent I that's sitting here, and it's got to be findable. If there's an intrinsically existent, objectively existent, concrete thing, it's got to be findable. But if I can't find this intrinsic I within my parts, and I can't find this intrinsic I outside of my parts, other than my parts somewhere, if it doesn't make sense anywhere within my parts or outside of my parts, I have to come to this conclusion that there's no intrinsic existence here. There's no intrinsically existent I. There's an inference that I can make. If I'm not able to be found within my parts or outside of my parts, these are the only 2 possibilities. The entailment of emptiness is if I am not able to find this I intrinsically one with its part or separate from its parts, it's not possible for it to be intrinsically existent. It's empty of intrinsic existence. So this is what we would do when we engage in ultimate analysis. And ultimate analysis is looking for a very specific kind of Jeff, a very specific kind of I, a very specific kind of ear, a very specific kind of form, a very specific kind of feeling. An eye, an ear, a nose, and a feeling, and a car, and a giraffe that exist from its own side, independent of mere imputation. Something that I can find that isn't something I'm creating. Something that I can find that's concrete, I can tangible. And the non-finding is the non-affirming negative, and that is the emptiness of intrinsic existence. And that mind of ultimate analysis doesn't tell us anything else. So of course there's no I, because there's no intrinsically existent I. So when I'm moving closer to that, there's no I because I'm looking for an intrinsically existent I. So that kind of I doesn't exist. So there's not that. There's not that. There's not that. But then when I come out of the mind of ultimate analysis, that's only looking for one specific thing. That's if the object exists intrinsically. In this case, if the I exists intrinsically. I have to harmonize my experience and what I just experienced. When I go to move closer towards this I and I have a non-finding of an intrinsically existent I, but then I come out of ultimate analysis back to conventional analysis, I come to recognize that, hi, my name is Jeff. I'm speaking to you right now and you're listening to me. And there is some way that I have to harmonize the fact that things don't intrinsically exist and that things exist. And the only conclusion that one can make is that things exist subjectively. If they don't exist objectively, but they do exist, there's only 2 options, subjectively or objectively. And if they do exist, because I'm talking to you right now, then there has to be this mode of existence, of subjective mode of existence, of mere imputation and dependence upon a collection of wholes and parts, causes and conditions, and so forth, dependent origination that serve as a basis of designation for imputation. That's it. And that basis of designation feels so much like the thing I'm calling it, and I feel like it exists as I'm calling it. That chair and that dog and that couch exists just as I'm calling it right within the object. But when we subject everything in the universe to ultimate analysis, just as I subjected this I to ultimate analysis, we will have a non-finding of an intrinsically existent this or that within its parts or outside of its parts. And the entailment of emptiness is, if it can't be found intrinsically within its parts or outside of its parts, then it doesn't intrinsically exist. Because there's only two places, in the parts or outside of the parts. There's not like in between outside of the parts and inside the parts. There's just two options. So this is the mind of ultimate analysis. And the mind of conventional analysis, the concealed mind, the concealer truth, is a mind that just is concealed in one respect, not knowing that the object is mutually exclusive with the basis of designation is mutually exclusive with the designated object. But the mind, the conventional mind that is accurate is the conventional mind that recognizes that things exist subjectively. The subtle conventional mind is only understood once you negate what the mode of existence that's wrong is about your conventions. So the real conventional truth, the subtle conventional truth that a superior would recognize, an Arya would recognize, would be one that is subjectively existent. And he or she would have no problem saying that causes make results. Karma is real. The Four Noble Truths work. So this is the harmony one has to come up with between how things dependently arise and conventionally exist. Cars drive down roads and cheetahs are super fast when they run. How to come up with a harmony between that and the fact that none of those things I just mentioned intrinsically exist. So this is our job that we, when we become Buddhists, kind of clock in and out of every single day for decades, trying to figure out what this mode of existence is that could be subjective, and what the mode of existence isn't, which is objective from its own side. And we come to understand more and more subtle layers of what that means as we study more and more and more of Master Chandrakirti's works and Arya Nagarjuna's works, and then looking at Master Baba Vega's works and so forth, and Master Shanti Deva's works, and Lama Tsongkhapa's incredible works on emptiness. The only way we will ever come to understand what this Heart Sutra is really getting at, the only way, is if we engage in an enormous amount of study, meditation, personal investigation. There's just no way we're going to understand this. Just a quick read through it, maybe just a simple syllogism, and thinking, oh, things are empty of intrinsic existence because they dependently originate, and not looking at what the implications of that are, not looking at how you can harmonize these two things, how you can say that emptiness is the meaning of dependent origination is the meaning of emptiness. How can this positive phenomena, how can a negative phenomena and a positive phenomena have this harmony? How can something which is a non-finding harmonize with the found? And this is what we work on, and this is what we must study. If we want to have the promises like we were talking about at the beginning of class, like, hey, we can never suffer again, and we can then also have the highest amount of happiness in the universe. If we really want those fruits, we have to kind of climb the tree to get to those fruits if we're looking for them, if we're looking at a way to think of it. And without the climbing of the tree, we'll never have those fruits. And it's a tall tree. But the good news is it's a tree that can be climbed. If it was a tree that you couldn't climb, then it would make no sense for me to talk. It'd be like, you could win the lottery, hopefully. But this is something that if you put the effort in 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt, you will achieve these goals, because all phenomena arise from causes. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. The cessation of causes as well are taught by the Great Seer. You just have to collect the perfect causes for the perfect result. You have to put this exact collection of causes together, and then from that exact collection of causes, omniscience is born. We're so fortunate to know this. So this Heart Sutra is the gold. It's what tells us that, hey, there's none of this stuff that you think, but there's all of this stuff out there that is this stuff. It's just not operating in a mode of existence that you think that it is. Ponder that. And if you stop concretizing things, your suffering will slowly go down, like cold water being put on boiling water. Little drip at a drip at a drip at a drip at a drip. It'll slowly quell that heat of the self-grasping ignorance that creates is the mastermind beyond all the chaos of our mind, all the inappropriate attention and all the attachment and all the aversion. That mastermind is that ignorance that thinks things exist in a mode that the Heart Sutra says they don't. And hidden within it, of course, we find the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva path of the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. Okay, cool. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Now, again, imagining everyone, we're at Vajragriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, imagining Buddha Shakyamuni and Lord Chenrezig and Master Shariputra are there, Venerable Shariputra, and there's this expression of the ultimate truth that's being transmitted to you. And to remember, all sentient beings are here as your guests to be able to hear this miracle of the ultimate truth. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once, the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas. No I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas. No mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear, they transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is. O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala Javene Jodamba Nengushe the Jungai the Dojan Jubaba Lama Yibushinzi Nizung Gandroso La Shazelo Aga Samara Jajandara Samara Aga Samara Jajandara Samara. Aga Samara Jajandara Samara Vede Adonga Dekate Parakate Parasangati Bodizoa Baba Gonjo Sanji Gaye Medoji Labadoji Bebadoji Shewadaji Jagi Baji Medovision Danji Jedin Goye so Agirin Don Juju Wadan Midun Bejan Down the Wadan Don Badon Jim Bonzon Doji Daji De John Den Dade Lejo. Outer mandala offering, and we'll include within the outer mandala offering the source of all my good, as we've been doing. So let me just I need some music of some sort. There it is. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas High, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. The source of all my good, by Lama Tsongkhapa. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the very proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I have died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teaching. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I am not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well, the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy. I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them, even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize, as well as I can, the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay, so we have been looking at bodhicitta, specifically the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And these teachings are so incredibly rich and work if we apply them to our minds. We look at this incredible lineage passed down from Lord Maitreya to Arya Sangha, and then his half-brother Acharya Basu Bandhu, down through the extensive deeds lineage to Master Salimpa and Lord Atisha and Master Drone Tompa, and then down through our various other masters and to our teachers, to us. And we're so fortunate to have this unbroken lineage of instruction that is so powerful. And if we apply it daily to our mind, it will actually produce results. And we won't have to have some kind of blind faith. We will discover that these teachings that have been given actually work, and we'll know it because it will be firsthand experience. We have to rely upon secondhand information at first, but that secondhand information is coming from someone who's discovered it themselves, just like we can discover it. So we're really fortunate to have these such specific steps that get us from the place that our mind's at, disturbed, full of self-cherishing attitude, only thinking about ourselves, feeling bad all of the time, to this mind that delights in doing virtue, that is joyful like a child on a playground in doing virtue and working for others, a lightness that we've never experienced before. And this lightness isn't something that only special people can have. It's a lightness that only the people who engage in the causes for the lightness can have. And we've got the causes for the lightness right here. We have the way to make our mind not worried all the time. As Janjai Rilpi Dorje says in his beautiful ornament, Mount Meru, he says that we've been worried since beginningless time. It's time to stop worrying. And the only way we can stop this worrying mind is stop what causes it right at its root. And it's that self-grasping ignorance that's just sprinkled with the self-cherishing attitude. That self-grasping ignorance just says this concrete I is something to cherish more than anyone else in the universe, and I should just disregard you and just go for what I need. And this is the philosophy of most of the world, that I'm, not oblivious to you. I literally will blatantly disregard your needs to try to satisfy my own. And unfortunately, this has been the thing that's made us suffer. This is the thing that's made our minds so weak. We think that we're strong when we're selfish, but we're so weak. And our minds are in its most debilitated state when we're thinking about ourselves and not thinking about others. And our minds are in our most powerful, happy state when we're able to think about others and stop thinking about our own every moment's thing that is us. We're just so enamored with ourselves. We're so into us. And that thing that makes us so into us keeps us from experiencing the highest amount of happiness in the universe. And this is what we're learning about, getting rid of this thing that is like, wow, I'm so into me, that makes me feel bad all of the time. Even though it seems like me being into me should make me feel better, unfortunately, me being wicked into me, there's like a thing that happens and it makes my mind more disturbed than if I'm caring about others. So there's a change, a thought transformation that has to take place, because we think that, caring about ourselves first and foremost, I'm number one, you're number two, myself, other. This is our kind of normal way of thinking. And the Buddhas don't think like this. Bodhisattvas don't think like this. They don't have bias. They don't think it's a good excuse not to love someone because they're difficult or because they're doing horrible things. They don't think it's an excuse not to have compassion for someone because they're doing horrible things. They actually think it's more of an excuse to have compassion for someone because they're doing horrible things. And it's more of an excuse to love them because they're doing horrible things. This is the change in thinking that's going to take place in our minds when we start really working on it. 7-point cause and effect starts, of course, with equanimity, then moves on to, that serves as this kind of foundation. We have to establish a foundation for having a mind intent on others' welfare. And this mind, this foundation, allows us to build up affection for beings, make them attractive to us, make them lovable to us, and not just some, all beings. So we're working through this process in relation to every single type of being in the universe, with equanimity, looking at it in terms of our relation to neutrals, friends, and enemies, and then moving through the next steps, looking at how we respond in terms of all sentient beings are our mother, remembering their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness, in respect to friends, neutrals, and then difficult people. So we're trying to make it so once we get to the steps of love and great compassion, or love through the force of attraction and great compassion, that we've built up this idea that every being in the universe is someone that is lovable and we want to somehow repay the kindness of. So we learned that love is this idea of seeing sentient beings who are bereft of happiness and wanting them to, saying how nice it'd be if they had happiness. May they have happiness. I'll be a cause for that happiness. So we went through love already. I won't go back through that because I want to get to the section on compassion. So we've built up this idea that we have affection for sentient beings. So we've moved from this place where we have bias and so forth, and to a place where we start to see every single being in the light of affection, because of we recognize these things that we forgot in our previous lives about their kindness. So we're removing these veils and we're actually beginning to see things in a way that's actual reality, that every single sentient being is my mother, I am just merely designated independence upon among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serve as a basis of designation. And that's what I was then when they were my mother. It's the I. So they are my mother. They are my mother. They were my mother. However you need to think about it, but we think of this beginningless I. We can remove the barriers of the kind of lights out of death and lights on, and remember that somebody who was kind to me last week doesn't mean that they weren't kind because it was last week. And we say, well, then we look at the relationship that we had, and that relationship of kindness, if we look at it in terms of the continuum, was part of a kindness to my continuum, part of my mother, the mother of my continuum. She was a mother to my continuum in previous lives and so forth. So we have to think about these in a broader way, that my continuum, at that point in my continuum where I labeled the I on that basis of designation, this person previously, who I now dislike, was previously someone who took care of me when I was vulnerable. So we come to think in totally different ways. And we build it up in a way where we see beings in the light of affection. We see them as attractive. We see them as lovable. We want them to have happiness. We say we'll be a cause for that happiness. And then because we see them with so much affection, we then say, I don't want you to suffer. And this is when we move on to the next step of great compassion. So the equanimity is the pre-step, and then recognizing sentient beings as our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, all established base steps. And then we move on to this actual mind intent on others' welfare that turns into the biggest mind intent on others' welfare, which is bodhicitta. So let's read about compassion. In order to understand the cultivation of compassion, so this is from Lama Tsongkhapa's amazing great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, volume 2. In order to understand the cultivation of compassion, you must know the following topics. The object of compassion is living beings who experience misery through any of the 3 kinds of suffering. The subjective aspects are thinking, how nice it would be if living beings were free from suffering. May they be free from suffering. I will cause them to be free from suffering. The steps of cultivating compassion are first to cultivate it towards friends, then towards beings who you have neutral feelings, and next towards enemies. When you have equal compassion for your enemies and friends, cultivate it gradually towards all living beings in the 10 directions. So when we do the meditation at the beginning, we do the closest beings, and then neutrals, and then difficult beings, and then we add in all of the other beings in the universe. So we're trying to do these exercises not for no reason. There's a method to the madness. The reason is because this is how we do the meditation according to the textbooks. What I'm teaching isn't something original, thank goodness. It's what was taught by Buddha Shakyamuni, passed down by the Nalanda Pandits, and then taught by Lama Tsongkhapa and our kind teachers. So we need to know this. So it says, Acharya Kamala Shila, during following the discourse on knowledge, set out this way of gradually cultivating impartiality or equanimity, love, and compassion, while distinguishing specific objects of meditation. It's an extremely important point. If you train in these attitudes of equanimity, love, and compassion without distinguishing and taking up specific objects of meditation, but only using a general object from the outset, you will just seem to generate these attitudes. Then when you try to apply them to specific individuals, you will not be able to actually generate these attitudes towards anyone. But once you have a transformative experience towards an individual in your meditation practice, as explained previously, you may then gradually increase the number of individuals you visualize within your meditation. Finally, take all beings in general as your object of meditation. When you sustain this practice in meditation, you will generate these attitudes correctly, whether you are dealing with individuals or a group. So here, don't imagine beings on Pluto you don't know. Think about beings you actually interact with. Think about those strangers that you've seen and think about how close they were to you. You see them as distant, but they were so close to you. So they are so close to you. You've just forgotten how close they are to you. And when you're in the supermarket, you'll start to see these beings in a different light. You'll not just see them as folks just pushing around a cart, discouraged because they can't find the kid. You'll see them as beings who are so kind to you. You'll see them as someone who you do have this relationship that you've both forgotten about. And Pabunka Rinpoche says that you'll see a bug and say, Mama, that this is the way our mind will change. And imagine if we felt like that about everybody. When we saw, people having a hard time in the supermarket and we saw them as this spontaneously caring about them like they were our dear child, like Acharya Kamalashila talks about, that would be a different way of thinking. So who's Acharya Kamalashila? I thought we'd talk about that for a second. I think it's important. So Acharya Kamalashila, 8th century master, student of Acharya Chandrashita, the great abbot Chandrashita. There's an important story that goes along with this. So Trisung Detsen, who was the king after Sunseng Gonpo, Sunseng Gonpo made the Tibetan language and everything and sent translators to India to make the language, Tibetan language, be able to have the language of the Dharma. Made specific rules around translation and so forth. And then that was in the 7th century. Then 8th century, we have King Trisung Detsen, who was also a Dharma king. They're considered Dharma kings, who promoted the Dharma. So Trisung Detsen, 8th century Dharma king, founded Samye Monastery. And if I'm not a historian, so I'm just trying to give you the details of it. I don't have the thing in front of me. So King Trisung Detsen founded Samye Monastery, who you've heard much about, because he then invited Padmasambhava, Master Padmasambhava, and Master Chandrashita, the great abbot, to come. And Chandrashita was so kind to come to Tibet and give teachings and so forth. And various teachings were going on there, and there were like kamsans, houses within Samye Monastery with different individual kind of groups of folks in it. And when Acharya Chandrashita passed away, before he passed away, he said, if there's anything that gets mixed up, anything that gets screwy, that doesn't sound right to your ear, because they were really keen on keeping the Nalanda tradition pure in Tibet. So Acharya Chandrashita said to King Trisung Detsen that if there's anything that's starting to sound funny, or these teachings are deviating from the Nalanda tradition, then you'll have to call my student, Master Kamalashila. And these two beings are, just for your awareness, holders of the Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamaka school. They're holders of the kind of autonomy school that's like the Yogacara autonomy school, the one that leans more towards the Asanga's mind-only tradition, but is still a Madhyamaka school that negates true existence, even at the level of a particle. So they're holders of that view, and Acharya Kamalashila was then needed Because after Acharya Chandrashita passed, and they said that he probably, if this was propped up or these things were being said when he was alive, he would have stopped it. But after he passed, there was a master called the Hashan Mahayana, or the Chinese abbot, who started propagating these views that you don't really need to do anything but empty your mind of conceptual thought. Non-discursive state of awareness is all you need to achieve. Actually said you don't need the 6 perfections and so forth once you get to this place of true basic like nothingness, and that nothingness was your goal in terms of emptying your mind of thought, and that every thought was bad. Virtuous thoughts are bad, non-virtuous thoughts are bad. It's all conceptuality. It all is samsara. It's all wrong. He'd said that a black cloud and a white cloud both cover the sun, and a white dog bites you or a black dog bites you, it's both being bit. And he's comparing this to conceptual thought and saying that emptiness, the real realization, the way you would get to this Dharmakaya state would be to just unload your mind of all conceptual thought and just sit in a blank state. And you can see that these teachings are still being given today. Just empty your mind out and just sit there. Just sit there. And that'll somehow help. And yeah, so this is the great debate that then ensued. Acharya Kamalashila was invited by King Trisandetsen, who came to debate Master Hashan, and they were having a really hard time before Acharya Kamalashila came, because Master Hashan was a great scholar. He wasn't just someone who didn't know anything. He was quoting Buddha, quoting Buddha's sutras, quoting Buddha's sutras. The monks would try to debate and use logic. They knew what he was saying was wrong, because based on what Chandrashita was saying, Master Chandrashita was saying, they knew that you needed to have calm abiding and special insight, and you needed to not only calm your mind down and get it to be able to focus, but you needed to be able to get it to focus so that you could focus on something really specific, and that's an identification of an object of negation, intrinsic existence, and negating that, with a calm enough mind to negate intrinsic existence, while then coming out of ultimate analysis and still being able to posit conventional reality. And Acharya Kamalashila came and was able to defeat the Chinese abbot Hashan, and able to prove that this wasn't the way. There was no way to uproot cyclic existence without getting to what the object of negation is, and without cultivating the ripening paths and the liberating paths. Not just emptiness. Even if you had the right emptiness, emptiness isn't enough. You also need the liberating paths of virtue and the accumulations of the necessary things, and renunciation if you're looking for an abiding nirvana, and it coupled with it, and bodhicitta if you're looking to achieve complete Buddhahood. So these things were set forth, and it's said, the story goes that he left Tibet, but some shoes were left in Tibet. So they say this is a sign that this idea still kind of sunk in, unfortunately, to the Tibetan tradition in some areas. This idea of nothingness, this idea of space emptying the mind, and that space-like emptiness just meant like non-conceptuality and just duh. And luckily, Sakyapandita even came to verify it for us and said that many Mahamudra meditations, if you're not careful, can end up in result of an animal rebirth. And not saying that Mahamudra is very pure, but if you have the wrong teacher, you may come to the thought that you just empty your mind and you just abide in this space that's like super special. And it won't cut the root of cyclic existence. And it talks about, in the 3rd volume of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, right from the King of Concentration Sutras, Buddha Shakyamuni recalling or talking about his master, Acharya Udreka, who was one of his last teachers before he went alone, who had believed he had achieved nirvana, but was at the peak of existence in concentration. And what we come to learn about is if you're in anywhere within cyclic existence, you're abiding in a status where there's afflictions. There's self-grasping ignorance. And if there's self-grasping ignorance, and then there's going to be karma, and then there will necessarily be another rebirth within cyclic existence. So this is what we have to come to learn. So anyway, that's the story about Acharya Kamalashila. Many of you know the book called Stages of Meditation by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. There's the 3 books within the book called the Stages of Meditation. It's very confusing. There's book 1, book 2, book 3, but sometimes it's called the beginning, middle, and end, or 1, 2, 3, or the second book, the first book. But anyway, there's 3 of them, Stages of Meditation. The Stages of Meditation book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama that we know about is the middle one, the second. But Lama Tsongkhapa in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment quotes the first one, quotes the second one. So he's not just inclined to only one or another. Okay, so the way to cultivate compassion is as follows. Consider how these living beings, your mother, experience general and specific sufferings after falling into cyclic existence. I explained these sufferings earlier. So, who's been listening? Ringing a bell, general sufferings, specific sufferings of samsara. Maybe we heard this somewhere before. So it just goes to show you right here, again, Lama Tsongkhapa is pointing us back to the previous teachings. So the general sufferings of cyclic existence, we find the presentation of the 8 sufferings, the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the suffering of separating from the pleasant, suffering of meeting with the unpleasant, the suffering of not getting what you want, and the suffering of the appropriated aggregates. So this is the under general, the 6 types of suffering, the uncertainty of cyclic existence, the insatiability that you have, having to take a rebirth, having to shuck off bodies, having to go from the high to the low, having to be all alone without companions. 6 sufferings. And then the 3 sufferings of the suffering, the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. And what did we see here? The object of compassion is living beings who experience misery through any of the 3 kinds of suffering. So we need to know clearly what those are. And then Lama Tsongkhapa says not only those 3 summaries, you have to look at the offshoots of what those all contain. And those offshoots are the generals and specifics of cyclic existence. Generals, the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, and the 3 sufferings. And where are those found? The teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity and the medium scope. When we identify the truth of suffering in the medium scope, this is where we find that. And then the specific sufferings of cyclic existence, we have to look in 2 places. It's interesting. We have to look at the small scope section, the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, and the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So we have to look in both of those sections to understand the specific sufferings of cyclic existence. And if you remember, when we looked at Arya Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, it states the general sufferings. It goes over the 6 types of suffering, if you remember. And then after the specific sufferings, it says the sufferings of the 5 realms of cyclic existence, because the demigods and gods are contained within one. So Arya Nagarjuna does all the realms of cyclic existence in the specific right after the general in the letter to a friend. But in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, we see the sufferings of the lower realms in the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity that we must know about. These are the specific sufferings of cyclic existence. We have to, if we're going to become a Buddha, we have to know where these beings are, who they are, what they suffer like. And within that, we find the hell, hungry ghost, and animals situations. And within the hell realms, if we're looking at it from an outline perspective, we find the suffering of the 8 hot hells, the suffering of the 8 cold hells, the suffering of the surrounding hells, and then the suffering of the occasional hells. So we find all of these various types of suffering that we have to know about if we're saying we want to have compassion for all sentient beings. I want to remove the suffering of all sentient beings. I want to remove the suffering of heat, the suffering of cold, all these different types of awful things that go on. But if I don't identify what those sufferings are, I won't know what I'm having compassion for. So we look at what the hell realm has. If you are following the Lam Rim, you don't have to believe this, but it may help. Then you look at the sufferings of the hungry ghost, how they have the suffering of internal problems of getting food and external problems of getting food, like boundaries or problems to them being able to get to it. And then the problems with the food itself or the drinks themselves. Like they have all of these internal and external obstacles and all of these kinds of sufferings you can read about when you look at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And then the suffering of the animals we can see even with our own eyes. We know what those specific sufferings of the animal realms are. You know, they get boiled in pots and then we eat them. And, you know, we boil beings alive. We don't have to look further than that. We eat the meat of beings that are smashed in the head and then chopped into pieces, bloody pieces, because we crave flesh. These beings are tortured and stand in a line and they're just, you know, shucked off like they mean nothing. And they're just made like slaves in the meantime. And they're treated like, you know, we would never even treat our worst enemies. And then we rely on them for a source of food. This is the arrogance that we have. This is how they suffer. And then we think about the cold outside and not having a house. We love our house. We love our blankets. We love our bed. We love our special beds. But I look outside sometimes in the morning, just at dusk, and you see the animals and the deers running around, and they don't have a special house, and they're worried any moment one of the wolves, one of those coyotes out there is going to get them, or maybe a bobcat's going to get them. They're just in constant fear that they're going to be eaten by something bigger, or that they're going to be, even if they're the king of the jungle, become too old, and then they'll be killed because they're no longer of service. Suffering the animals have, we can see from our eyes. And we see the suffering of human existence. It's so clear. We move on to the medium scope and we see the various sufferings that we have in the human realm. And then we look at the various sufferings that there are in the higher realms than we're even at. When we look at the suffering of the gods, they eventually have to die and they fall when they die. And they have, you know, this projection into something that's so different than they expected. Their beautiful world starts to smell and starts to wilt, and they see they're going to be born in a lower realm, and this creates such an amount of terror in them. It's just it's something we have to think about. And then we have the suffering. You can't even imagine the kinds of suffering that occur even in the God's realm, where you have what I just mentioned, but also anxiety, because God's realms and special places like here, you have stuff because of previous merit you've accumulated. In the God's realm, all you care about is desirous objects. And some gods have better merit than others. And there's an anxiety that if you're that God that doesn't have the most stuff, or you're that, just fill in however you want to fill, that person who doesn't have the most stuff, there's an anxiety because all that matters there is having the most stuff, the nicest stuff. So you could be in a celestial realm with anxiety, folks. Imagine that. Imagine having that situation, you know, having to fall to the lower realms. And then, you know, even if, say, you're out of the desire realm and you don't have the suffering of suffering anymore, then even if you're in the first 3 levels of the concentration, the form realm, first 3 concentration levels, you still have the suffering of change and the pervasive compounded suffering. And then if you go to the highest level of cyclic existence, you still have pervasive compounded suffering because you're in a body within cyclic existence, even if you're at the peak of cyclic existence in a concentration where everything negative is completely suppressed. It's only suppressed because you haven't realized emptiness. And you can have the highest concentration in the world, like Buddha's teacher Udreka, Master Udreka, and still have to be born back into cyclic existence because all that work you did was for naught, because you didn't do the right work. And that's why it's so important to me to present what is the appropriate work that needs to be done, because if we don't, then we won't get it right, and we won't, you know, have a shot at it. So what does it say about the form? You could get, we look at the hell and we think of all these terrible things, and that's the worst state of samsara. And then we think about the formless realm, which is the peak of existence. And it says, the deities of the highest realms, the form and formless, though they escape these sufferings, the suffering of change and the suffering of suffering, nevertheless die in possession of afflictions and obscurations, because they have no control over their future dwelling place. Even they suffer on account of dysfunctional tendencies. So if you haven't uprooted what it says needs to be uprooted in the Heart Sutra, then you will be born into the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings again. You may only have pervasive compounded suffering if you got some special shamatha, samadhi in this life. You could suppress things, but if you went through all that work, you would still be in cyclic existence and think that you're not. The mind is very deceptive, and we have to get control over it. We've been under the control of the mind since beginningless time, and we've never had control of that mind that's in control of us. We could control the mind that's in control, great. But if we're not in control of the thing that's in control, that lack of freedom is misery, and that's what Buddha came to tell us about. So let's stop here. I gave some information for you to think about, I think, and let's conclude with the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. And thank you so much for your patient listening. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Ozandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified. Om benzo sato samaya manipulaya benzo sato zena vajida deda meva zulugai meva zubugai meva anuragta meva zavazini me baraja zavagamazi me ginam shugan guru hum ha ho bhagavan zavadata gata benzo mame moka benzo baba maha samaya sapa hum ve. May always be protected by Paul and Lama. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kala Rachamo Ramo Wacha Dacha Tunjo Rulu Hong Jo Om. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has risen not diminish, but increase forevermore. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and help for beings. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara's end. In a prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, my root teacher, a complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Oma, Om, Oma. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, place the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like a Lord Atisha who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you and look forward to seeing you next time. Please study the Lam Rim and apply these teachings in your meditation. It's the only way they'll do anything for you. Take care.